Before you start, exercise caution. You should always speak with your doctor before you start, stop, or change any part of your healthcare plan, including physical activity, exercise, or therapy. This video cannot and does not contain healthcare advice. It is for general informational and educational purposes only. Use of WhisperSLYDE is solely at your own risk.
Standing abduction, soft knees and the foot in the back. And notice how the support leg is slightly bent and pushing out to the side. Repeat this 10 times. This is standing, soft knees, hip abduction on the right. You can do 10 reps. The knees are not fully extended. Diagonal hip extension and abduction. She's standing 45 degrees to the central plane, pushing backwards and out to the side. She's going to repeat this 10 times. Knees are slightly bent. Hip extension diagonals with the trunk flexed to 40 degrees. Stable leg is slightly bent. She's pushing backwards and out with the trunk flexed. Meaning she's going to bring in her lower gluteals more. Repeat. This is hip flexion. Coming on up, core is engaged. She's going to repeat 10 times. Single leg downward dog. She's going to repeat this 10 times. Downward dog, she has both feet on the slider. Core is engaged. She's going to repeat this 10 times. Standing soft knees, central hip extension. So notice how the support foot is in the middle, pushing back, requiring some core. She's going to repeat this 10 times. Hip extension with a narrow base. Notice the support foot is on the ground beside the WhisperSLYDE. She's pushing back, standing erect, and going to repeat 10 times. Hip extension central flexed. Notice how the trunk is flexed to bring more of the gluteals in. Her support foot is in the center, and she's going to repeat this 10 times. Kneeling hip adduction. Notice how she's kneeling on a soft pad and bringing the leg across. She's going to repeat this 10 times. Kneeling hip flexion. Notice how she's kneeling on the soft pad on the left, halfway up the slide, WhisperSLYDE, and then her right leg is pulling forward for hip flexion. Supine bridging, comes up, core is engaged, transverse, and she's going to repeat this 10 times. Upper body, cross body series, pushing with the left hand, pulling with the right, going back, pushing with the left, pulling with the right, pushing with the left, pulling with the right. A cross body pull, coming across. Notice how the end of the WhisperSLYDE is fixated here on the bed with the manual therapy belt, and just pulling across. Dynamic downward dog. So core is stabilized, neutral position, coming up, resisting, going out the wall used for stabilization. Standing hamstrings, the heel is on the buffer on the train, the foot is behind or further back on the train, making the hamstrings work. So we're doing back, hip pull-ins. Notice the wall is stabilizing, the train is going across, the knees are slightly bent. This is front hip pull-in. So it's using the wall as stabilization, the foot is in front, the knees are slightly bent. Central hip pushback, so the knees are slightly bent, the toes are up on the buffer, the foot is standing in the middle, the pelvis stays relatively still. This is diagonal hip push out, so notice the foot is to the side of the head, there's a slight angle, so they're pushing into extension and out to the side. Narrow glute pushback, so the trunk is forward at 40 degrees, the foot is standing to the side of the head, forefoot pushing back on the train, knees slightly bent, and the pelvis remains relatively still. Wide glutes pushbacks, the trunk is bent forward at 40 degrees, the forefoot is on the train, and the stabilizing foot is wide in relation to the WhisperSLYDE. This is narrow hip pushback, so the foot is standing slightly to the side of the head, forefoot is on the buffer, hips are remaining relatively still, pushing back. This is back hip push out. Notice the foot is back, the knees are slightly bent, the pelvis is not moving, and the right leg is just pushing out to the side. This is forward hip push out, so notice how the foot is further forward of the head of the slide, but it's using the wall as a stabilizer. Again, the hips remain stable as she's pushing the right leg out. This is hip sideways center, so the stabilizing foot is on the headboard, the hips don't move, and the knees are slightly bent. This is diagonal hip stability and extension. The left hip is actually working probably harder than the right, and the pad's used for equalization of the platforms. Kneeling hip extension and hip stability, using the wall still to stabilize and the pad to equalize the platform heights. This is kneeling hip abduction, using the pad to equalize the platform height and the wall to stabilize the WhisperSLYDE. Trunk tucks, so the WhisperSLYDE is held against the wall for stability, the trunk is held stable, and then the knees are coming up under the chest. This is single shoulder pullbacks. Notice how she's standing to the side. This is standing table triceps. Standing trunk flexion, so both feet are on. The back of the board is stabilized by the steel, so there needs to be some stabilization there. And then the hands obviously are stabilizing, and this requires a lot of trunk control.